Hello.
And good evening, Graham. Monday night recording. Delighted to be together. Freezing cold, and we both experienced a clash of Leeds United versus Harrogate Town at the weekend. An interesting experience. Did you write about it, Graham?
I did. I did 1,200 words on my personal experience of the whole day from leaving with the supporters' buses in Harrogate, from
Ah,
posh Harrogate, get all the way to 1970s Red Riding Trilogy, David Peace, Ellen Road.
where will I and fellow readers find that? Is it
It's
online?
online at the Harrogate Advertiser website as we speak,
Excellent.
harrogateadvertiser.co.uk.
I look forward to reading that, Graham. And
Mm.
so tonight, what do we want to start with out of our topics for
A
tonight?
quick interruption.
Yes, let's start with a quick interruption since I interrupted you before an interruption.
Let's go back to the days when critics were critics
Oh, yes.
and were bold enough and powerful enough to actually be rude in the mainstream, not to a niche audience, even if
Yeah.
that's a big niche audience who likes what you say anyway, but just to the mainstream. So I've got this. I'm actually a big Rod Stewart fan when he's good, although of course he quite often hasn't been good.
Yeah.
Anyway, in 1983, Paolo Hewitt in the NME interviewed Rod. He just had a number one with Baby Jane, so he's a hugely world famous musician. And this is
Yeah.
this is how Paolo Hewitt finished his interview in the NME. He
Yeah.
said, fearlessly so, to believe that 10 years on, Stewart is original or a first is way short of the mark. But the circus will continue. The show must go on. Rod Stewart will remain the dazed character he now is. He'll keep believing his press, keep convincing himself that he enjoys going on the road with a bunch of hooligans, albeit session musician hooligans, at the age of 38, keep milking the formula that's brought in millions, and still try to believe that he's a vital part of contemporary music. His time has come and gone. Everybody knows it, except Rod Stewart, full stop. You would not get somebody these days in
No.
that position in the mainstream being so brutally honest and rude about, say, Taylor Swift or
No.
Charlie XCX or
Absolutely.
Billie Eilish or Coldplay or anybody.
No. I wonder where Paulo Hewitt now is.
Well, at one point he was very close to Paul Weller and was always writing sleeve notes for
Yeah. Yeah.
Style Council. But yeah, generally, and he used to write the odd book, so I've got no idea, quite frankly. But you're right, it's a good question.
I only asked that because Rod Stewart is about to headline Glastonbury, isn't he? From memory, I think that's right.
Yeah, I think it's the Legends stage on the Sunday afternoon rather than main stage at the
I
evening.
think you're right. I think it's that legend slot, the Sunday afternoon
Mm.
sleepy slot. I actually think it's really good that Paulie Hewitt wrote like that because, in many ways, I think it would be fair to say that Rod Stewart has never been the Rod Stewart that was the Faces Rod Stewart or the early solo Rod Stewart for a very, very long time. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but actually, you still go back and you realize that they're by far the best songs. So, the best
Oh yeah.
Rod Stewart album in years, actually, but the compilation or the compendium, I should say, of Faces recordings for the BBC. That's by far the best. Well, I acknowledge there is some merit in the American standards that he's been doing, but it's still not the mighty works of young Rod. But I
If
think
you listen to,
critical
yeah,
faculties they do diminish. I mean, I think Elton. I mean, I remember when Elton was actually becoming self-critical about the standard of his songwriting when he was in his 30s and worried about
mm,
would he ever be having huge hits again. So but then he was obsessed with sort of recording how his songs were doing. He kept a list every week of where he was in the charts, and maybe initially he would think, well, why aren't people buying the records anymore? But then he would analyze it or whatever. But
yeah.
I suppose, I mean, Elton's gone through various different phases of regenerating himself. I'm not just talking about the wigs that get more ridiculous, but actually who he chooses to work with and going into musicals, etc. Now with Rod, I mean, maybe Paul O'Hewitt's point actually has been proven rather more correct than you could say the same if you were being critical of Elton in those 30s
Yeah,
phases.
but the point surely is that it's too late to be rude about Elton or Rod now. Just as if in
Yeah,
20, 30 years' time, future reviewers, completely online because there'll probably no print at all by that point,
yeah,
future reviewers start saying that Taylor Swift wasn't actually that good musically, or Billie Eilish was a bit boring.
Well,
That was going to be a
I
bit
started
late.
saying that last year. So am I
I
ahead
know,
of the
but
curve?
we're in a tiny minority. Anyway, that was just a quick derivation back to the past of
That's
critics.
fine.
Let's move
But
on.
are we saying that we do not have the same critical faculties applying at all these days?
No, the whole world has changed, and people's thinking's changed, and the media's changed. So it's that ship sailed. There are critical writers out there, but they're mainly either a tiny minority or they're on a website that has a niche audience where they can safely criticize things because it's not going to ruffle any feathers that actually matter.
So what would you put that down to?
Well, I've already done. The world's changed. I mean, you want to tell me? I could tell you how the world's changed, but that's going to take quite a long time.
That could be the entire podcast.
Yeah, let's not do like a history of the last 40 years.
Yeah, well, okay. Now, I mean, I don't want to talk
Yeah,
about
let's
myself.
move on to
I
films.
do not want to
Let's
talk
go on to
about
the new
myself,
films.
Graham, but I would be very disappointed if I didn't think I was still having strong opinions and you were still
Oh,
having strong opinions.
you for sure are. But and this podcast is sort of quietly, fearlessly honest. But to be fair, we haven't got the audience that NME had in 1983,
True.
or the BBC News has now, or I mean,
True.
it's a big audience, obviously, for
Yeah.
Two Big Eagles and a Small Car, but it's not that big.
No. So let's not just keep polishing our own egos there. Let's look at
Exactly.
as you make the very good point, Graham, that
New
actually often the
films.
very best films of the year come out in January and February. We know the reason for that. We're entering the award season. Golden Globes already happened, of course. Got BAFTAs to come up, and of course then the Academy Awards. So often, because people's attention span, as we've said, is perhaps shorter than listening to an entire episode, even of Two Big Egos, and a Small Car, but it is a concentration of really good films at this time, or potentially really good films at this time. And coming up this weekend, for example, I think we've got what's coming out, and Maria's coming up, and of course, Complete Unknown's coming up. So we'll see what those are like. Baby Girl has just opened this last week, and you and I have been
September the 5th.
Yeah.
September the 5th coming out.
Yeah, and you and I have been to see A Real Pain, and you and I have been to see Nosferatu, and they're going to be the films that we're looking at now. But you're already, more skeptical than others. How good are critics' favourites Nosferatu and A Real Pain? Okay, so 5 stars The Guardian gave to A Real Pain. Not sure how many they gave to Nosferatu, possibly 4, I think. Largely good reviews for Nosferatu and really strong reviews in favour of A Real Pain. Graham, I'll listen to what you have to say first on these 2 films.
Well, Nosferatu is the old Dracula vampire story, sort of based on the F.W. Murnau 1922 German expressionist silent film, and also Werner Herzog's 1979 version Nosferatu, with Klaus Kinski in the main role. And it pays a due to both those films, and it looks fantastic, and it feels fantastic because the director is Robert Eggers, who made the black and white film The Lighthouse with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson just a few years ago. And it's really visceral, and it makes the whole basic story of vampires, which has been told many times. There's been so many versions.
You could argue they've sucked the blood out of the story, couldn't you? That's been done so often.
It feels real. It's literally got flesh and blood. And so for the first half of the film, you think, wow, this is superb. It's really horrific and really gripping and looks great. But then you realize that, wait a minute, there's no good dialogue, and the characters are all a bit two-dimensional. And good actors like Willem Dafoe and Nicholas Hoult and Aaron Taylor-Johnson have no good scenes. There's no memorable moments between those actors when they're talking to each other amidst the drama and the horror. And you realize that the script's actually a bit wooden, and the only originality in the script is the lead female character played by Lily Rose Depp, who's allowed to be a Me Too type woman who's very strong, who eventually takes on the terrible vampire Nosferatu, and that's it. And the rest of the story has no flesh and blood. It's the skeleton of the story. And so, even though if I was 12 and never seen a Dracula film, I would have thought this is the best film ever made. But if you've seen Dracula films, despite the fact it's got many strengths, it isn't the best film ever made. So that's what I think of Nosferatu.
I think that's a very astute summary of it. I do think that the extraordinary visual side of it is sustained throughout. You mentioned The Lighthouse. I think that's a remarkable piece of filmmaking as well. Yeah, the novelty, if you like, in this is the character, the Depp character in this. The question here is how much is she in a position to make her own choice over it, which is what I think, unless I'm misunderstanding what Mark Kermode suggested in his review, is that she actually has the freedom to make the decision whether to give herself up or not. When I was discussing this with Celestine, she said, no, that wasn't the case. I mean, that she was still, she had really no choice at all. If she wanted to save everyone else, she had to sacrifice herself. So that's still the amount. Now, maybe that's semantics, that it didn't still really amount to a choice. But I guess there was more focus on her than is normal in such vampire movies, where it's
usually, which is good. We're not knocking that.
You know, it's
that's
usually fun. The story is usually focused on the men and what they do in the story. So that is perhaps the novel element of it. I take the point about, it's not the greatest ever dialogue that's been put together in the piece. I thought it still sustained that well enough without being as original as the filmmaking itself. One other surprise, and I'm sorry to focus on Mr. Commode's response to it, but it'd be interesting to know what you think. He described it as a romp. I didn't see it as a romp.
A romp?
A romp. Now, I know he's a great fan of horror movies, and he mentioned, I think it was Kim Newman that he mentioned, who's the sort of horror film expert. And maybe if you watch a huge number of these things, maybe you might call it a romp. I prefer the word that you used earlier on about it being horrific in parts and grotesque in parts, and I think that's much more important that it was that.
There's two elements a romp needs to have, either humor or a sense of camp. Now, this is a film devoid of camp and devoid of humor.
Correct. So I don't know what Mr. Kermode was referring to, because those are exactly what was not there. Now, would either of those elements have added to the film?
No, it would have undermined the film. The strength of the film is its reality and its atmosphere. Yeah. Comedy would have undermined it.
Exactly. We didn't need to go down into Hammer horror, which he actually mentioned Hammer horror in his review. I cannot see it being like Hammer horror at all in its style. No. Nor was it like Carry On Vampires. And I thought the fact that it was so gross and grotesque was one of its great strengths. It never broke from that. I found it became a strangulating film as I watched it. I couldn't bear watching it on one hand. On the other hand, it was so visually striking and arresting that it was fascinating to watch, to see how film works, the genre of filmmaking worked. I think lots of reviews have made the point that, interestingly, the colors in the film are limited to gray and blue, because what the director has decided to do is to mirror the Dracula figure in sucking all other color out of the film, which I did think was visually interesting. And we know we played black and white.
That sort of sums up the film's shortcomings. It's that very dedication, commitment with being so grey and so devoid of color that stops it being as good a film as it could have been. It needed a bit more color, I think, to be a truly great film. But it's certainly, I mean, if all the Dracula, versions made over the last nearly 100 years, I would still put it in amongst the top ones. It's good film.
Bearing in mind that F.W. Murnau's 1922 film was famously banned, or all copies were supposed to be destroyed, famously, but obviously one survived. That's not going to happen to this film.
No. I think it's going to be a connoisseur's film.
So what would it take now to get a film banned, do you think?
It's remembered by horror fans in general. It's a horror film. It's definitely a genre film.
It's a genre horror film. What would it take now to get a film banned?
Quite a lot, because if it was going to be too risky, it'd end up being like on a streaming platform only and get a tiny release in a few hours cinemas. I don't think it'd be banned. The cultural world's now so stratified and caged in and boxed in and segmented that it's hard to think of something that would unite everybody enough to actually annoy.
So that's a proposal anyway for listeners. If listeners can in any way think of how to get a film banned these days, it would actually be a stupid exercise, because that's the last thing you want to happen in a film. Now, our second film is A Real Pain, made by Jesse.
It's not really a real pain. That's just the title of it.
That's a very good clarification. We'll come on to the playing on words of the title. Am I going to get his name right, Graham? Jesse Eisenberg? I'm right, yes?
That's right. Yeah, you got it. You nailed it.
So Jesse Eisenberg writes, directs, produces and
Co-stars.
stars or co-stars. Although interestingly, Kieran Culkin's
Culkin, yeah.
award that is already
Mm.
received for acting in this film is for Best Supporting Actor, which I think is a debating point. I mean, I didn't see him as being the supporting actor. I think he's the performance that we're talking about in many ways.
That's true, but they wouldn't give him lead actor because it's a semi-comedic role. In comedy roles, very rarely get you lead actor awards.
So I mentioned The Guardian gave it 5 stars. Again, let's go with your thoughts on the film first, Graham, and then I'll chip in as and when.
Well, it's clearly a very good film.
Yeah.
But it's essentially a small film about big issues, and we're talking really big issues. And it's played like a sort of like more gentle version of a 1970s Woody Allen film. Because if you actually look at Woody Allen's films in the 70s, even his most famous ones, his best ones, they're quite lively and inconsistent. And this is very even of tone. From start to finish, it maintains the same tone the whole time. It's got a great feel, a bit like The Holdovers last year, which was like
so
about
you've made the two comparisons already I wanted you to make. Woody Allen, number one, and The Holdovers, number two.
But it differs because The Holdovers is a much lighter subject.
Yes, it is.
A Real Pain is about the Holocaust, and it isn't just about family relations. It's deeper than that. It's about how we interpret the past, what we feel about each other, how we express emotions. You know what really matters. It's also film
Graham,
disguised as a lightweight film.
Yeah, well, also, Graham, what is real pain experiencing that now compared to what was real pain in the Second World War, being in a concentration camp?
But that's a bit of a flip. I think that's a bit of the flippant point. That's one of the more flippant sides of the film.
But
I think the only slight problem with the film is that it takes on such a big subject. Because its tone is so good, because the dialogue is so good, because the script is so tight. I mean, the film lasts less than an hour and a half.
That's part of it. It suits that. I mean, you mentioned it's a kind of small scale film, and part of that, I think, is its length. That's so, spoiler alert, yes, they do visit a concentration camp. They are cousins, left money to be able to go on this trip by their grandmother, who was from Poland and experienced and survived the Holocaust, and they're making this trip. It's a kind of road movie film on one level in Poland, and so within that, the sequence in which they visit the concentration camp, the only voice we hear talking is the guide as they go around, and even he says incredibly little. I thought that was so well judged, the power of the experience. When
they had that montage of the different parts of the concentration camp site where all the people were killed, and it goes very quiet and very simple. That's the most real moment in the whole film. And if it lasted any longer, it would topple the film over, because the film is too light to sustain anymore. The only other real moment in the film that really resonates is the very end. It's a classically existential ending where it focuses on Kieran Culkin, who refuses to meet his cousin's family and be human and friendly. Instead, wants to be on his own, surrounded by foreigners and travelers in an airport. And the look in his face as the film ends is, I'm sure that Jesse Eisenberg thinks it's an open ending, where it may just be that he's open to new experiences. I see it differently. I see the film as a man who's literally lost, whose soul is damaged, who doesn't know where he's going. And so it's a very deep ending for quite a light film.
I think, as a piece of filmmaking, the judgments that Jesse Eisenberg makes throughout, the symbolism of that moment, the speech that he makes about his cousin, and why on one level he's a real pain in the butt, but at the same time he actually says, look, I want to be like him at times, he's charming, and this, that, and the other. So all that I thought was so well judged. I mean, as a character study, I thought that was a superb piece. Coming to terms, or still trying to come to terms with the Holocaust, an ongoing struggle that will always be an ongoing struggle. I thought it was a piece of filmmaking by a young, not a freshman filmmaker, but it's still an inexperienced filmmaker. I thought it was one of the most encouraging pieces of filmmaking from that point of view, announcing a real filmmaking talent. And it'd be fascinating to see where Jesse Eisenberg goes in future, given how strong I think this is a piece. And the Woody Allen comparison is bound to be there. This is, I mean, you use the point about, Woody's films probably would, those early films would be more random and more unpredictable how they went, and that's true. They were more in the style of jazz, I guess, which of course is Woody's great love in music. And this is much more controlled than that. So that's where it's going to be interesting to see, having got the tone. I'm not saying this was cautious. It wasn't. I actually think it was quite brave in taking a tone that was more muted. The powerful moments within it, therefore, were all the more powerful because, if you like, there was almost a deafening silence, for example. Pretty much that's what it was when experiencing the concentration camp. So I think it's going to be one of those films. By the end of the year, we are still going to reflect on this as being one of the most significant films of the year. That's my prediction.
It's a very good film, but if you look on Kieran Culkin's character as an anti-hero, in the sort of style slightly of Jack Nicholson in Bob Raffleson's Five Easy Pieces in 1970. That film takes the anti-hero character and his life as far as the story can possibly go. There's no area unexplored in the script. This film deliberately leaves plenty of space to think. It doesn't delve as deeply as Five Easy Pieces. But I think if I'd tried to do that, it wouldn't have worked. I think it works so well because Jesse Eisenberg has reined it in so much.
I think that's true. It could tip it over. I mean, the revelation, spoiler alert, of what's happened to the Kieran Culkin character before in his life. That's, if you like, it didn't dwell on that. But my word, when you realise what he has done to himself in the past, that's significant in itself. But again, it's not dwelt on beyond the fact that it explains the fragility of how he is. So again, I think I'm not going to use the word that this is tastefully done. That's not. I don't think it is about being taste. I don't think it was about being tasteful or.
You can't really do Auschwitz in good taste. It's
that's the point. You can't. So taste doesn't come into this, but nor is it confrontational either.
No,
this is not a banging heads about Auschwitz either. You're seeing characters coming to terms with their past, their family's past, and it's not done in a way that's in any way heavy-handed, but it has a huge impact on you.
It also reminded me of our trip. I mean, they were at a concentration camp near Lublin. We went to Auschwitz about 1993 when we were staying in Prague, and we rented a car and drove across Czech Republic, across the border to Poland. We went to Auschwitz, and again, it was a sunny day when we went, and it was a sunny day in a real pain. It really reminded me of that whole.
A sunny day, Graham. Do you remember, with no birdsong? That was the most extraordinary thing about it.
Yeah, but the whole place wasn't eerie. It was weird.
Do you remember in one field they were tending to? I think it was either hay or straw that they were.
Yeah, they were ploughing the fields.
With. And then we had, and you saw washing on a line, and the more prosaic things going on still around us. But
there are no answers to some questions.
No, you're absolutely right. So, Graham, I would urge people very much to go to both these films, but particularly A Real Pain. Actually, it's a joy in many ways to go to a comparatively short film. It's pretty rare these days to have a film of that length. I would urge more filmmakers to do that.
I agree entirely, yeah.
So, Graham, next subject is, and we'll return to this subject, I think probably quite often during the year ahead, which is Bradford's City of Culture 2025. The year has just started in more ways than one, of course. And already Bradford has had its opening night, which I think was called Rise, which was a performance in the city square. And the thing that you're looking at this stage is how the idea of the City of Culture has evolved. Started in 2013 by the Tory government, but from an original idea in 2009 by the Culture Secretary at the time, a certain Andy Burnham, under the Labour government. And you're wondering quite if it's evolved in the way that would have been met favour either with Andy Burnham's vision in 2009 or indeed with how it started in 2013.
Yeah, well, I used to work at the Bradford Telegraph Argus newspaper, so I've got a soft spot for Bradford. And also, I always loved Bill Eyre, the film adaptation in 1963 of Keith Warthouse's fantastic novel starring
Yes.
Tom Courtenay.
Yeah.
So I'm on Bradford's side, and the program does look great. You know, there's lots of interesting, exciting events. You can't really knock it. The director, Kirsta Hosley and Stephen Frayne organised Rise, and Stephen Frayne used to be the magician called Dynamo.
Dynamo.
So so Rise includes like live music, poetry, aero acrobatics, magic. So they're chucking everything at it, and I'm sure it'll be entertaining and enjoyable. But my fear is that I noticed this with Hull when Hull was City of Culture. A lot of the events seem designed more to please the local residents than to interest and excite visitors. And I think the whole point of City of Culture, apart from expressing the culture that is within that city, and Bradford's got very rich heritage in terms of films, music, literature. The whole point of it is to change the perception of the outside world in terms of culture and the arts of your city. You obviously need to bring your local public on board, but that should not be the main point of it. Otherwise, you're just in a loop of, pleasing people in a circle. And my worry is that it's evolved over the years in a situation where they're so desperate to like tick the right boxes with local residents the whole time that they've lost sight of the fact that art isn't there to be a part of the social welfare system. Art's not really there to achieve anything except to be great art. And I think there's a danger that the city culture idea has changed towards that direction.
I mean, ultimately, and it was interesting on the local news. They covered, obviously, they went back to Hull and they asked a few people what impact City of Culture had, and only one suggested in any way that there was any legacy whatsoever. Everyone else felt there'd been absolutely no legacy for the city.
Yeah.
In terms of long-term benefit or anything structural that you could turn to. I mean, obviously the Ferns Art Gallery was done up for it, I seem to recall. But it hasn't become a great place for masses of wonderful restaurants, bars, high quality shops, etc. It's still very much Hull. Now, whether Hull was resistant to the idea of culture being imposed on it is a debating point. Mark Graham addressed it in the play that he wrote about it, having spent his time there observing the festival. And then, the last event after the festival, as it was ending, was his play about how it had gone. And maybe Bradford faces that same situation of how much is it that you impose an idea of culture on a place, or how much do you just say, look, we're here for a year, we are selling ourselves to the world, come and enjoy us. So I think that's where it's difficult, is how much is it generated from within and how much is it a vision that's come from outside and is being imposed? And what is more likely to sustain in a city?
Well, the definition of success for city culture is about drawing people in, which helps your economy. Yeah. So, for example, the reason that Liverpool looked on its success in Manchester is success is because they now attract lots of people to come and visit, to come to shows. They attract people to come and live there who want to be involved with the cultural scene.
Yes.
So if you don't achieve that, it doesn't work. So the point of Hull and Bradford should be to use what they're already good at, the culture they've already got, the great artistic heritage they've already got, to look outwards. It shouldn't be about looking inwards. It should be about looking outwards to bring the rest of the world in.
And do you feel that is going to happen?
Well, it's obviously too early to tell them. I'm being very critical on the basis of having seen no shows whatsoever. I'm basically talking of someone who visited Hull. Yeah. So this is really me talking about my Hull experience. But I'm just worried that Bradford will end up being the same as Hull. It's a concern. It's not a criticism, it's a concern.
In many ways, I think Hull was always going to be a more difficult one to sell. I enjoyed very much going to the Hull City of Culture, and I go to a lot of, over the years, I've gone to so many plays in Hull, and I've gone to concerts in Hull, as well as obviously to football matches in Hull over the years. So it's a city that I've always enjoyed anyway, but I was not a typical Hull City of Culture person that was being attracted. I would go in my professional capacity. I just felt as an idea was more difficult to sell than Bradford. I feel that Bradford stands a better chance I feel it's a more diverse culture that is applicable in Bradford. I think Hull, as we know from when Philip Larkin got off the train and suddenly felt like he had arrived at the end of the world, and he rather felt, oh, good, I'll stay here. I think that was always to Hull's disadvantage, that it was on the end of a line. Bradford, although
that's true.
We know that Bradford does face the ridiculous problem of its rail network never being taken seriously because they're only ever interested in lines going from the bottom of the country to the top and not across. So there's still
I
going to be a
gave
bit
up
with
of
that.
getting the train to Bradford when I used to work there.
It's still a challenge, and that's ridiculous if that's the case. But I think
that isn't the main problem, though.
No,
the
but I
main
think its
problem
position. I do think its position is better, Graham, and I do think actually the groundswell of what is already cultural in Bradford, perhaps I think people have a clearer idea of than was the case in Hull.
I think Bradford should be proud of its own history and heritage.
Yeah,
stretching back decades,
yeah,
just like Manchester is. The interesting about Manchester is that Engels lived in Manchester, obviously, when he and Marx were coming up with the Communist Manifesto. Now, Marx is definitely not cool these days, but Manchester is still proud that Engels was there.
Yes.
It's like you need to embrace your whole history, your whole heritage, your whole culture, and your art scene, and tell the world we've been good for a long time. We're not like some underdog that's trying desperately to attract your attention. We are already good, and that's how it should.
I do think the multiculturalism that is absolutely part of Bradford is to the strength of this festival as well. It will be, I think, potentially the most wide-ranging of any festivals of culture that have happened, because Bradford has a broad culture, and people know that about the city. That there's significant input of the Asian community in the arts in Bradford that's already there, as well as having reactivated version of the national get the name so confused these days. National media, what is it now called?
Yeah, it's quite long. All I know is that they pinched some of the great stuff to get down to London, and it seemed to be closed for a while. So I'm not sure what it is
anyway,
now.
It's being reactivated at its most positive. If it's called the National Media Museum, good. If it's not, forgive me for the fact that it keeps changing its name. Also, Bradford Live is supposed to, of course, the former Bradford Odeon is supposed to be out for overall during the festival season. So let's see what happens with that. It's due to be a fantastic venue. We'll see what happens with that. Of course, you've got elements to play on with the Bronte sisters. You've got elements to play on with Keith Waterhouse. You've got elements to play on with Delius. There's lots
children.
of rock beds that you can
David Hockney. David
Hockney. So from that point of view, I maintain my point that actually I think as a starting ground, it's a stronger opportunity than the city of Hull.
Well, having been critical, I'm going to agree just for the sake of peace here. But I would like to say something that might quite excite you.
Yes.
About Bradford.
Yes.
In terms of its heritage and history.
Yes.
Try and guess which singer of one of your favourite bands is from Bradford.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.